Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful story. It's about science, it's about ethics, and it's about the very core of who we are. This is the story of the Havasupai tribe and their incredible fight for control over their own genetic story.
So I want you to just think about this for a second. Your DNA, it tells your biological story, right? But who gets to read it? And what happens when the way they read that story completely contradicts everything you believe about who you are and where you come from?
At its heart, this is a story that began with a promise of healing, but it ended in a betrayal so profound it would literally change the rules for scientific research forever.
Okay, so our story kicks off deep in the heart of the Grand Canyon, with a partnership that was really born out of hope and, honestly, desperation.
For generations, the Havasupai people have lived in this magnificent, isolated landscape. But in the late 20th century, a modern health crisis hit them, and it hit them hard. Type 2 diabetes was just running rampant, and they turned to science, hoping for answers.
Now, this partnership was built on a very, very specific goal. Tribal members gave their blood, their most sacred biological material, with the crystal-clear understanding that it would be used only to research diabetes. That was the deal. That was the promise.
And this is where the story just takes a shocking turn. That promise was broken. The trust that they placed in these researchers was completely shattered when the tribe found out where their DNA had actually gone.
And this just lays out the betrayal so clearly. On one side, you've got the promise, diabetes research. That's it. But on the other side, wow, the reality. Their blood was being used for studies on schizophrenia, for really stigmatizing theories about inbreeding, and even for data on ancient human migration, none of which they were told about, and none of which they ever agreed to. And this right here gets to the absolute heart of the harm done. See, that research on migration patterns, it suggested the tribe's ancestors came across the Bering Strait from Asia. This completely contradicted their sacred origin story, which says the Havasupai people emerged from the Grand Canyon itself. So this wasn't just a breach of privacy, it was an attack on their culture, their religion, their very identity.
So you might be wondering, how could this even happen? Well, the whole conflict really boils down to two fundamentally different ideas about what permission actually means. The Havasupai believe they were giving what's called informed consent. It's pretty straightforward, right? You're told exactly what the research is for, in this case diabetes, and you agree only to that specific use. The consent is laser-focused and limited. The researchers, though, well, they were operating under a totally different assumption. It's called broad consent, and it's this idea that once a sample is donated, it can be used for all sorts of future studies, even for questions that scientists haven't even thought of yet.
This analogy just nails it. The context and purpose of your consent matter, right? Letting a photographer take your picture for a yearbook is one thing, but finding that same picture on a massive billboard downtown without your permission, that's something else entirely. The Havasupai agreed to the yearbook, the researchers put them on a billboard. You know, this case wasn't just about a single terrible misunderstanding. It exposed a much larger, much more troubling pattern in scientific research.
And there's a name for this pattern: biocolonialism. It's the practice of taking biological samples, especially from indigenous or vulnerable communities, and treating them like a natural resource, like oil or timber, something to be extracted and used for profit, often with zero respect for the culture or beliefs of the people it came from. This quote just captures that mindset perfectly. It's the claim that genetic material is just a natural resource to be harvested. It frames people not as partners, but as things to be mined for data. It's an incredibly extractive way of thinking, and it's exactly what the Havasupai tribe decided to fight against.
And fight they did. The end of this story wasn't just some apology note. No, it was a legal victory that completely changed the landscape of research ethics. After years and years of legal battles, the Havasupai did what many thought was impossible. They held a major university accountable for this profound breach of trust and for the misuse of their sacred genetic material. And the outcome was just groundbreaking. I mean, this was the very first time a community successfully sued for and won the physical return of their DNA. They also got a financial settlement, sure. But the real legacy? This case forced a massive change in how research is done. It led to much stricter rules for informed consent, and it fundamentally shifted the power dynamic away from the researchers and back to the people participating in the study. The end of this long legal battle was marked by this deeply symbolic moment. The blood samples, which had been taken from the canyon years before under these false pretenses, were finally returned to the Havasupai people, back to their rightful home, so they could be cared for according to their traditions.
And that brings us right back to where we started, with a question that is more relevant for all of us today than ever before. The Havasupai fought for sovereignty over their DNA. In an age where commercial genetic testing is everywhere and our data is the new gold, their story really forces us to ask, who do you trust with your biological story, and who gets to decide how it's told?